religion and science have not completely banned the use of cannabis. So the first take-home message for today's talk is religion or science, they have not completely banned the use of cannabis.
Viewers, you might have heard so many things and so many stories about cannabis, marijuana. The moment the word marijuana comes to your mind, only the narcotic aspects, drugs, and all those things, and materials, and the parties, and all these things come to your mind, basically. I will let you know. Guess, there's a riddle. Guess what can be in common between the sellers of yoga, Himalayan sadhus, hangman's noose, fashion designers on one hand, and new hope for cancer patients, insomniacs, many psychosomatic diseases, illnesses, as well as the evolution of mammals to some extent related to this common thing. And also you can see now it's so common about modern day rape parties. So you can see a canvas from one end to another end, and the single word answer is cannabis. Cannabis is nature's most hardy or among hardiest plants, does not need your cajoling it, singing to it, dancing with it, or saying lullabies to grow it. It grows on all type of lands, and that is where. And also now it is being considered as a panacea for environmentalists as a carbon capture. It consumes 3 to 4 times of carbon dioxide per year per acre compared to a forest. So you can see the diversity of this one. Now, what we are talking in this series is basically on the basis of science, not on the basis of testimonials or hearsays or traditions, but we are talking about the hardcore scientific facts. Based on scientific facts, we are taking on the medicinal aspects. First 2 talks will be on the medicinal aspect. The remaining one will also talk about, the remaining one maybe on 14th perhaps, will be on where myself and Avitosh will be talking, will be more on sustainability aspect of it. It is also called as my book, which has just come, is and Murali Krishnan's book is also, we are the editors, co-editors in this one, Dinesh Agrawal, who is in the audience perhaps. Is a cannabis or hemp for sustainable agriculture and materials. The other book, which is coming maybe in a day or two online, is a cannabis oblique marijuana for medicinal or rather healthcare. The medicinal aspect and the nutraceutical aspects are concerned. So today we are going to talk about the most important aspect of it is on medicine. There are several thousands of patents. If I can say, there are more than 15,000 patents on cannabis in just last 20 years. You can see the growth of this area. The total market of this one is now expected to be around 75 billion in next 5 years in the global market. And if India and China opens up their market for the cannabis, it can go into $500 billion. So this is the whole business all about. And now, today we are going to talk about the therapeutic aspects, traditional and maybe historical aspects about the cannabis, the chemicals which make it medicinally active, psychoactive, are called as cannabinoids. And I think this no person can be better than Murali Krishnan to talk about this. He has been working on this area for the last several years. He has published 4 books on medicinal botanica, if I can say so. So over to Murali.
Good evening, everyone. Today we are going to talk about cannabis. So the first question we are talking about is, so currently in the society, it's always a kind of a issue. We're asking whether it is having any protective effect or a toxic effect. So when I use the word toxic, does it have any poisonous effect? So that's the most important question that we want to know. So let me ask the audience, What are the two molecules, or two drugs, or two chemicals, or two substances, whatever word you want to use? Do we know that has been existing for the last 10, 20,000 years, that we know from way back before Christ? One is wine, the other one is cannabis. So you go to any literature, that's what I'm going to talk about. So wine is one of the substances, or you want to talk about it's a natural product. It has been there, well documented, has been used globally. Similar to the wine, cannabis also has been used globally. So now the question is, why is it still in use historically? Then let's look into it in a very, very simple way. How can we generally classify it when we say cannabis? At least for the audience, it can be of two aspects. Let's recollect it or let's educate ourselves. How do we classify cannabis? What are the basic concepts we should know before we accept it or before we discriminate it? Let me use the right word. Either we are going to accept it and live. I like Dr. Rajiv telling that it's going to be $500 billion. So that's the whole economy of India can be changed within few years. So are we going to adapt? Are we not going to adapt? If not, us, somebody is going to take over. So the question is, as a general audience, you should know a little bit basic concept about it. And let me conclude by saying, is it toxic or non-toxic? I'm not going to make a decision here. I'm going to let the viewers, the audience, to make sure that they can do what they want to do. But as a scientist in this field, I just want to have this question. Is it poisonous, non-poisonous? Is it toxic, non-toxic? So with this background, let me start. As I'm from Auburn University. I'm from Auburn, Alabama. We say it's Alabama is a state which is very close to Atlanta, Atlanta, Georgia. We are in the south. It's a very beautiful city, small university town. Okay, like Annamalai University, like BHU. It's only university is there. It's a beautiful town. I'm from Auburn, Alabama. So now, before I start into getting into cannabis, the concept cannabis is a substance of abuse. We all agree. So what do you mean by substance of abuse? So I'm going to use the word, they are harmful, they are hazardous, they are psychoactive. The word psycho means, psych means mind. They activate the mind or they modify the action of the mind. So that is the reason it's called as psychoactive substances. So psychoactive substance for us, it can be alcohol or any illicit drug. So this is the definition that is given by the World Health Organization. Against the word psychoactive. Psycho means mind substance affecting the mind or behavior. Illicit, it is forbidden by the law. So in general, that is substance of abuse. So now, what is the problem of substance of abuse? Okay, I consume substance of abuse. So what happens? So number one, it becomes addictive. So we become addicted to that. We cannot live without, or we become dependent. And this addiction can lead to toxicity. So let's start with the simple addictive substance known to us. I'm going to start with caffeine. Okay. So definitely we all agree in some form we need caffeine every day in the morning. So we have been addicted. So because of addiction, what happens? You become dependent. Whether you're flying in an aircraft or you're in a train, when you get up in the morning at 5:36, you have somebody serving you a tea. So definitely we become dependent. Are there toxicity associated with that? Yes, in acute, long term, but we don't know. When I say toxicity, I'm again going to bring this word toxic. Yes, caffeine can be toxic, but depends upon how much we consume. It's the dose, the dosage form, the duration, how long we have been consuming. So the same thing goes with nicotine, smoking, am I right? Addiction, dependence, toxicity, and death. So it's a true thing associated with substance abuse. So now, what are the common substance of abuse? Based on the National Institute of Health, there are several substance of abuse. You see alcohol there, you see nicotine, which we know, but marijuana is also a substance of abuse. So now I just want to make sure that we understand what is marijuana. Cannabis refers to all products coming from the plant Cannabis sativa. There are cannabis, under cannabis, there are three particular plants. One is sativa, there is indicum, am I right? But Cannabis sativa is the most potent one. They have approximately 540 bioactives. So this particular word, bioactives, is a common word now they use in the current scientific community to say the chemicals or substances present in a botanical. Bioactives, 540 bioactives. Marijuana refers to a product from Cannabis sativa, and usually they contain tetrahydrocannabinol, which is also known as THC. Okay, so marijuana, okay, is part of it's a product of cannabis sativa, which contains THC. So cannabis with very little THC, less than 0.3%, I'll go through that, is called as hemp, industrial hemp. Okay, anything above that, they have a significant psychoactive potential and they can induce addiction. So now we are clear what we say with regard to, as Dr. Raju was saying about hemp. When we say that, the amount of it is basically, it depends upon the amount of THC. Okay, the amount of THC is less, considerably, significantly less in hemp as compared to the other products. So that is the first concept we want to make sure we clear that. And then again, I want to make sure that we understand when you think about hemp and marijuana, it basically depends upon the THC content, the use, legality. There are three aspects that differentiates hemp from marijuana. One is the THC content. THC content is very less in hemp, significantly less, usually less than 0.3%. Uses, both these substances have uses. Okay, and then one has a commercially, it can be used or grown because of the less THC, other one is illegal. So now the second term I want you to make sure that we understand is cannabinoids and THC. Okay, cannabidiol, other one is tetrahydrocannabinoids. So one is derived from, both of them are derived from cannabis sativa. CBD does not have a psychoactive aspect, whereas THC has a significant psychoactive property. So that is the most important thing. Okay, CBD does not affect the brain. However, THC significantly affects the brain. Both of them act by the same mechanism. They both act by binding to a receptor, CB1 and CB2 receptor. Again, it's not a big word. When you think about lock and key in your house, everybody has a key to open their lock in their house. Very similar to that. A chemical in the body has to bind to a target in the body to exert an action. So based on that concept, cannabinoids or cannabis, CBD and THC has to bind to a receptor. Very similar to your lock and key in your house. A chemical, a key has to bind to a lock to open or to have an effect. Same way, a chemical has to bind to a receptor to elicit an action. So that is the whole thing. So now the concept is, as we started, you think about any religion, any culture globally, we have literatures to show that people have been using it for thousands of years. So we cannot deny the fact that cannabis has been used, is used, and will be used in the future. We can't stop that. So now as a scientific community, what are we thinking? Why is it still used? So that is the logic question that we have to ask. Different cultures, different religions, globally, east, west, north, south, wherever you go, you have cannabis. Now, why cannabis? Okay, so definitely we cannot stop the fact that it is being not used. Am I right? So that's one aspect. Now, I'm going to just show the legal use of cannabis before I answer the question. Cannabis in USA has been used for medicinal purpose, for recreational or adult use, and in certain states, it has not been yet legalized. Eventually, they are going to legalize. So in US, if you come, we have gambling. Certain states, gambling is legal. We have, like lottery ticket, we have scratch cards. Okay, very similar to India, we have lottery tickets here. And certain states has it, certain states does not have it. In certain states, we have casino, certain states not having casino. So now, cannabis is also under that. We are using it for medicinal use. We are using it for recreational use. Some state it has legalized, been legalized. Some it has not yet. I'm again using the word, it has not yet been legalized. So the question is why? When you know that you have a problem, why is it being used? The broad question, as a scientist, I have to ask, is it religion or is it science that is dictating the use of cannabis? So again, I'm making sure that we are understanding. If you're a religious person, why are we still using cannabis? If it is a scientific person, why are we still using cannabis? Yes, religion and science have not completely banned the use of cannabis. So the first take-home message for today's talk is religion or science, they have not completely banned the use of cannabis. So that is the take-home message. Now the question becomes why? Okay. So we have been using for religious, commercial, medicinal purpose. We all agree that it has an addiction potential. Why are we still in use? Because they are not toxic. They are not poisonous. So the big question that we are answering today is, whatever you say, it is not very toxic. Significantly, it does not have a toxic effect. So based on that, what are the ways that we can classify cannabis? When somebody is talking to you, what is cannabis? Cannabis can be classified through three ways. Endocannabinoids. Endo means within the body. They are naturally present. So first concept I'm trying to say is, they are naturally present in the body, whether we agree or not. 2-arachidiol-glycerol, 2-AG, and anandamide. The word anandamide is derived from Sanskrit. Anandam, happiness. So these are chemicals that are produced in the body to make you calm, to cause a bliss, to make happiness. So definitely they are present in the body. They are endocannabinoids. These are natural substances. They are present in botanical. They are called as phytocannabinoids, present in the plant, THC, CBD. And now, the problem now we are going to face scientifically is, now we have started synthesizing cannabinoids known as synthetic cannabinoids. Based on the structure of the endocannabinoids and phytocannabinoids, now the scientists are developing more potent cannabinoids. They are called as synthetic cannabinoids. So these are the general classification. Endo, present within the body. Phyto, from the plants, and then synthetic cannabinoids. So when I say the word, I told you about the word anandamide, it's a bliss molecule. Some people call it as runner's high. Okay? They are mainly mood enhancement. They can reduce pain. They have anti-anxiety effect. Okay? So that is well proven. They play a very vital role with mood, appetite, memory, and fertility. Currently, cannabis has been used for recreational purpose. You go to a lot of religions use it. Spiritual purpose, commercial purpose. As Dr. Rajiv was telling, it's going to be $500 billion globally. We are using for medicinal purpose. All these facts, you know that. However, in our book, we just showed you that it has been used for cosmetic purpose and nutraceutical purpose. When I say the dietary supplements, like multivitamins, in few years, we may be consuming cannabis. Okay? So definitely, it has multi-use. So before Dr. Govindaraju takes over, why can it be used in the disease state? The connection here is, cannabis can be absorbed, distributed, metabolized, and eliminated in our body. So when you think about a drug or a chemical, it can be absorbed. It can be absorbed through the nasal route, through skin, through eyes, through oral route. So cannabis can be absorbed in the body, products of cannabis by different routes. It can be distributed throughout the body. It has to be metabolized and eliminated. And as I told you, like a lock and key, it binds to certain receptors, CB1, CB2, to elicit this action. Again, you can see that it is absorbed through various systems, distributed, metabolized, and excreted. So whether we like it or not, cannabis is endocannabinoids are present in the body. And then when you take a phytocannabinoid, it can be absorbed, distributed, metabolized, and eliminated. As I told you, it's a simple network, how cannabis acts. They talk. So this way we call as neurotransmission, how two neurons or how two things talk to each other in the body. So it can do that message. Communication occurs when cannabis is administered. So from a medicinal point of view, cannabis can affect other drug action in the body. So I'm not going to go into details here. In a big product, if you're taking some cannabis product, and if you're taking any other medicines or drug, cannabis can affect the action of other drugs in the body. So that is the concept we are trying to bring in. So in big, cannabis has been used for commercial purpose, for agricultural purpose, for recreational purpose. Recently, we are using it for nutraceutical and cosmeceutical purpose. Particularly in India, men and women, we use a lot of cosmetics. So yes, cannabis has plenty of cosmetic value. And like vitamins, when you say nutraceutical, like multivitamins, cannabis also has nutraceutical value. So you can see that various products of cannabis has been used to protect a lot of diseases. We have cannabis in capsule, tablet, lotion, and cream formulation. I come from a pharmacy background, so that's a miracle here. Whatever dosage form you think about, tablet, pills, cream, lotions, we have cannabis product. It has nutritional value. That is nutraceutical. Cannabis has cosmetic value. We have so many skin formulation, moisturizer, lotion, cream, serum, soap, oil, exfoliator for different types of pathology. We can use that for different types of disease state. We can use cannabis products. Now, the last question I'm going to ask is cannabis toxic or non-toxic? So when you think about the effect of a substance in the body, as the dose increases, the effect in the body increases. You are tired, you drink one coffee. Sometimes you are not yet recovered from the fatigue. What do? In another 15, 20 minutes, you take another coffee. So you are stimulating your body. As you increase the dose, the effect increases. So that's the first concept. So now, based on that, based on that, when somebody asked Buddha, what is a poison? He asked, everything in excess in life is a poison. So now, when we say about cannabis, the most important thing that I'm going to tell you here is, it is the dose and the dosage that we are using is going to determine whether a particular substance is toxic or not. So number one, to conclude, cannabis is a natural product. Number two, it has been used for centuries. Number three, it has been used by various religions, various cultures. The immediate question that we are now asking is, why suddenly there's a burst of interest? Because it's a $1 trillion market. It's a $1 trillion market. So now the question becomes, is it toxic or non-toxic? Whether we like it or not, we have used for agriculture, recreational, medicinal, cosmetic, nutraceutical property. And now, to conclude, I just want to say it is the dose. What amount of dose a person is addicted is going to dictate whether it is toxic, poison, or non-toxic.
So today's outline of the talk is, I'll be just giving an outline of what are the different endocannabinoids which are present, which is already discussed by Dr. Murali, and just talk about the different effects of the compounds, the predominant ones being THC and the CBD. Then talk about what are the cannabis effects on health and its potential medical uses. And finally, I would like to discuss about the controversies, whether medical cannabis or marijuana versus THC or CBD-based medications are more effective. So Dr. Murali has already described about what is cannabinoids. So any compound which actually acts on those receptors is defined as a cannabinoid. So there are three types of cannabinoids, as Dr. Murali has already discussed. One is the endocannabinoids, which means that these are actually synthesized within the humans or in any animal world. So the most important thing of this endocannabinoids is it is synthesized on demand, meaning whenever there is a requirement of the cell or a neuron or any part of the body, the endocannabinoids are instantly synthesized. Synthesized on demand does not mean that the man seeks something to have for pleasure, and that's why these are synthesized. So it is required for some normal physiological functions in the body, and that's why it gets released. So in a broad term, these endocannabinoids are characterized as eat, sleep, relax, forget, and protect. So these are the generalized terms we call when these endocannabinoids are released. So the general term is these are chemicals which are released to calm a person and just rest. The two chemicals which Dr. Murali had already discussed is the anandamide, which is defined as EAEA, and 2-arachidonyl glycerol, which is defined as 2-AG. The second part is the phytocannabinoids, phyto meaning plant-based, and these are derived from plants as mentioned. And two important constituents of those phytocannabinoids are the THC and the CBD. There are other 60 different cannabinoids also present in these plant-based products, and there are 400 different compounds which are being researched. And finally, there are certain things called as terpenes, which give the fragrance. For instance, caffeine has a different smell. If you smoke, there is a different smell. And cannabis, if you're a person who is smoking cannabis, it gives a different odor or a smell. And these are mediated by terpenes. And these terpenes are also currently in research for different pharmaceutical benefits. The third one is the synthetic cannabinoids, which are synthetic materials which are formed by the pharmaceutical companies. They are basically divided into either for treatment of many disorders or some illicit drugs of abuse, like recreational medication, recreational drugs. These are synthesized, which are not medically approved. So the point here is that whatever is the different types of cannabinoids, these cannabinoids basically act on receptors. As Dr. Murli mentioned, the lock and the key concept, the chemicals which are either present in the body or whether given externally, these go and bind to the receptors. So that there are two types of receptors basically we classify. One is the CB1 receptor or cannabinoid 1 receptor, and the second one is cannabinoid 2 receptors. So when these chemicals bind to this receptors, they elicit a biological action. And there can be a lot of actions which happen throughout the body. And based on these binding of these endogenous chemicals to the receptor, we have differential effects. So as Dr. Murli mentioned, two important things we have to know is what is the dose of the ligand which is binding and where are these receptors located. Meaning, if the cannabinoid receptors are present in the brain, we have differential effects. Present in the heart, we have a differential effect. Kidney, it has a differential effect. So it depends on the dose and the location of the receptors to mediate the action. So we just look at where are these receptors located. So we usually classified as CB1 versus CB2. The ultimate precise way to tell in a short way is the CB1 receptors are predominantly located in the nervous system, and the CB2 is located predominantly in the immune cells. Immune cells meaning these cells are important for maintaining the immunity of a person. So as is shown in picture, the CB1s are most likely located in the central nervous system, whereas the CB2 is located throughout the body in different ways. In a small picture, there is a thing which is showing each receptors are located in, for example, in a neuron, there is something called as a presynaptic and a postsynaptic receptors, and these I'll be talking in the next slide. So how does this cannabis work at a molecular level? We'll just consider an example of a neuron. In the neuron, we'll have a presynaptic neuron and a postsynaptic neuron. We'll just, for the sake of understanding, think it as a neuron number 1 versus a neuron number 2, or a cell number 1 versus a cell number 2. So what actually happens is the information from one cell goes to the second cell, and that's how everything is communicated within the cells or in the nervous system. So when this information passes from first neuron to the second neuron, the cannabis is released, and these cannabis compounds, sorry, not the cannabis, but the cannabinoids are released, and these cannabinoids go back to the first neuron and then inhibit the release of these chemicals. So basically, this is a kind of a brake system to make sure that everything is moderated at equal amounts and in maintaining normal homeostasis. So what we have to understand here is that these endogenous cannabinoids, what they do, either the endogenous cannabinoids or the synthetic or the phytocannabinoids which we take, is that it is going to modulate how the cell actually communicates with each other. And the predominant function of these compounds is to inhibit the communication in a smooth way. So this is what actually happens in a nutshell is cannabinoids, whether it is endogenous or exogenous, they reduce the neuronal signaling in the brain or in the periphery or in the other parts of the body, decreases the functionality of the specific system. So what is important in terms of medical and scientific world is that whenever there is a condition where there is excess activity in the brain or in any part of the body, these cannabis-based compounds or the endogenous cannabinoids will be beneficial. For instance, let's take an example of a seizure patient. What they do is they show a lot of electrical activity in the brain, and instantly there are endogenous cannabinoids which are released just to counteract them and stop the electrical activity which is happening inside the neuron. Similarly, pain. The pain is actually when there is excess activity which is happening inside the brain. Anxiety and there is muscle spasticity disorders. These are all some of the conditions where the neurons or the any cell actually tries to function more, and cannabis-based compounds are therapeutically used in these kinds of disorders. We'll probably look at it in the next few slides, but the take-home message here is that these compounds are useful in any condition where there is hyperactivity. So, what effect these compounds have? As Dr. Murli has already talked about two different compounds. One is the THC, which is called as delta 9 tetrahydrocannabidiol, and the second one is the cannabidiol. It is termed as CBD. So, one is the THC because it is reaching the brain in high quantities. It's also termed as the psychoactive compound, and the CBD is usually considered non-psychoactive because it does not reach the brain in substantial quantities. This is what is the generic way of telling it. But looking at the molecular level, what is the difference between the THC and the CBD in terms of its effectiveness is that the THC actually binds to the CB1 receptors as shown in the picture. It's a lock and key mechanism. It directly goes and fits into the receptor, and then a person will start having various effects ranging from relaxation, then he has altered sensation, that may be pain relief. They feel hungry and they start eating more, and after some time they sleep. So these are all some of the normal effects of THC. Again, it's a dose dependent effect, and if you take in more quantities, you start having euphoria, you will have hallucinations and things like that with THC compounds. The most important thing about the CBD is non-psychoactive. The question is why? If you can see in this picture, the CBD does not actually bind to the receptor just like THC, but it just goes and binds in a different area. And what it does is it does not allow THC to come and bind there. So that's the most important way of defining how the mechanism of CBD is. It modulates the receptor. It does not bind to the receptor. It just modulates the receptor, and basically it does not allow THC to come and bind. That's the reason why it is not having any psychoactive component to it. So, which means the CBD can also behave in a certain way, and it has more of an anti-anxiety effect. It is shown to have anti-epileptic effect, antipsychotic effect. It also is a good pain relieving agent. It is more of an anti-inflammatory, and some studies are showing it is to be a neuroprotective agent as well. So the take-home message here is whether it is a THC or a CBD, the more likelihood of the drugs being developed is more likely to be a CBD-based compounds. Just looking at the way it acts through a receptor. So the next question, what we want to ask is how cannabis is considered a medicine. Is it real? Is it based on the previous religious aspects, or is it proven to be scientific? So let's look at what are the effects of the cannabinoids. It's pleasure or relaxation, memory, coordination, pain control, appetite, or vomiting reflex. So, what medical problems do you think this can be helpful for? This is the most important question we actually take from all the historical aspects, and then moving forward is based on whatever it is showing, is there any benefit in terms of treating a medical disorder? So, some of the potential research which is conducted and has shown evidence, these are called as evidence-based medicine, is these products can reduce nausea, it can stimulate appetite, it has been shown to have a huge amount of pain relief is there. I'll come back to that later. It can control muscle spasms and pain, and it can reduce tics, and also it reduces convulsions. So these have scientifically been proven to be beneficial, and more importantly without any adverse effects, not much of a severe adverse effects. So these are some of the ongoing clinical trials which are happening currently for the marijuana and marijuana based medications. There's a huge list of medications. I've selected a few, but just to understand that the trend towards these medications getting into the approval stage or maybe into the market stage are high, considering the therapeutic potential of these compounds. So again, coming back, there are different kinds of cannabis-based medicine, which has been already discussed. One is the botanical cannabis, which is medical marijuana, or they call it as medical cannabis. So this is not yet approved anywhere in US or in other parts of the world, but still people are using it for various therapeutic benefits. We have synthetic derived medications, which are FDA approved in United States. One is the dronabinol. This is usually given for patients who have nausea and vomiting after taking chemotherapy for cancers. So these patients have extreme amount of nausea and vomiting, and dronabinol has been shown to be therapeutically useful for decreasing this nausea and vomiting. We also have Nabilone, which is also again FDA approved for chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting. And there are also these medications are also approved for anorexia associated with weight loss in patients with HIV-infected patients or AIDS patients. So basically, here these drugs actually modulate the way the person eats food and how the energy is metabolized. So these are commercially available in US by prescription, and these are safe to take based on the reports what we have generated from a long time. Other medications which are not available in US but are approved elsewhere is navaximols. These are a combination of THC and cannabidiol. This is a mouth spray and it's useful for pain relief, muscle spasms. And currently, the FDA in United States is investigating its therapeutic benefits. And the other one is a rimonabant, and these are used for obesity and nicotine dependence, and it's a selective cannabinoid receptor blocker. It's not a drug which goes and binds and activates, it just goes and blocks the activity, which I have not discussed in the previous slides. The last one is, again, I said in the previous slides, the trend towards looking at CBD based compounds is on a high scale, and there's a lot of diseases which has been investigated for its potential therapeutic effects. So one currently approved indication for the CBD is seizures for various three different types of seizures. One is the Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, Dravet syndrome, and tuberous sclerosis complex. So basically, this CBD component is beneficial for seizures, as I said, or any conditions where there is high activity of a cell or high activity of a neuron. These compounds are really beneficial. The advantage of CBD is that it is not psychoactive, so it does not induce any behavioral responses. The abuse potential is extremely low. So, and there are various research which has been conducted with CBD with respect to various other disorders which have been mentioned, ranging from cardiac, intestinal diseases, skin, as Dr. Murli mentioned, bone, and arthritic and neuropathic pain. And recently, there has been several observational studies to study various effects of these CBD compounds in neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, multiple sclerosis, and so on. So the controversy again comes back to whether you use a medical marijuana or medical cannabis or THC or CBD based medications, and which is better among these two. This is the controversy which has been going on from past few years. So we just look at it, what are the pros and cons of these two medications. So the THC medications are also having psychoactive effects compared to the medical marijuana, or maybe even high because it's a restricted molecule. And these are chemicals in medical marijuana that moderate THC's psychoactive effects. However, these chemicals are not present in the medications. Medical marijuana is cheaper, not made patented by any pharmaceutical industry. So these are some of the advantages of having medical marijuana or medical cannabis on one side. Smoked marijuana can give effects within minutes, whereas the medications take over a long time, maybe an hour or two. Instant feedback allows users to take more if needed for relief, and due to rapid relief, may consume less if smoked. So this again, I'm talking about some of the benefits of medical cannabis. When swallowed, THC absorption is more erratic and less concentrated. THC effects are more unpredictable and variable, and possibly less effective. However, the problem with medical marijuana is that it's not FDA approved, FDA approval assures that medications are effective, safe, and properly labeled. FDA cannot evaluate medical marijuana as a drug since it is derived from a plant and it's not a standardized medical formulation. Medical marijuana is different everywhere depending upon how it is bred, under what conditions it is grown, and various other factors come into play. There's no way to know if medical marijuana is pure. It can be contaminated by pesticides, mold, fungus, depending upon the region where it is grown and how well the quality is taken care. And it's always difficult to approve something which is smoked as a medicine. It has never some of the negative effects of smoking can also be there, and depending upon the type of marijuana, it can undergo different types of chemical changes when burnt. There is no standardized measurement of the dose. Inhalation vary by individuals, unlike a constant way of taking pills. So, in a nutshell, the advantages of medical marijuana or cannabis is these chemicals that moderate THCs are psychoactive compounds. However, they are less expensive. We can give more immediate relief. Instant feedback allows for moderation, possibly less consumption, and less erratic absorption than THC medications. However, with the other side, which is the THC medications, these are FDA approved, meaning they are extremely safe, apart from a few side effects. These are standardized medical formulations. They are pure, they are not smoked, and they have a standardized dosing. And in the United States, according to the federal law, marijuana is still considered illegal, and that's the reason the hypothesis is that is marijuana can be still used as a medicine when it is illegal? That's the question we are trying to ask. So the last part of the question is Dr. Murli asked is this compounds toxic or non-toxic? So toxic by definition means that can it cause a death? Whether it's an opinion or is it a fact. So the question is that it's a fact that it doesn't cause death by overdose, unlike a opioid, unlike other substance of abuse, which can cause direct cause of death attributed to these compounds. Cannabis has not even caused a single death as of now, just because of overdose. However, the point is here that it can cause death because of its indirect effects. It means that you consume cannabis and you start driving a vehicle, you go on it because you are actually in a kind of a sleepy mode, or you are with a group of people and you are trying to hallucinate, and then you try to jump from somewhere and fall and get killed. So these are the indirect effects rather than the direct. So these are one of the case where a person actually fell to death after eating marijuana. He was actually hallucinating. He said that he can fly suddenly, and he went to a cliff and started to jump, and he died. So this is one of the case reports we have. So what could be the reason for this? Why it is considered non-toxic compared to other chemicals or substance of abuse is irrespective of whatever it does in the brain, different parts of the brain, whether it binds the cerebral cortex and causes altered thinking, causes impaired memory, or increased appetite, slow reaction time, or if there is loss of balance and incoordination when you consume, because it acts on certain regions of the brain which causes certain functions. The most important thing about this cannabis, whether it's an endogenous or exogenous given compounds, is that this cannabinoid receptors, which I talked about in the previous slides, is not present in the brainstem. What does that mean is these brainstem is a region in the brain which is important for respiratory center and cardiovascular centers. So unlike, for example, a opioid, if you take in high amounts just to relieve pain, it goes and blocks the receptors in the brainstem, and when the brainstem dysfunctions, there is respiratory depression, cardiovascular instability happens, and the patient can eventually die because of an overdose. So that's part of the system which actually controls respiration and cardiovascular centers. In cannabis, the best medicines, the receptors for these compounds are not present or less scarcely present in brainstem. So there is no CB1 or CB2 receptors in the brainstem, and hence, even if you consume little bit of more dose, the patient might have different effects, but he will not die. That's the concept we wanted to tell. So the ending point here is irrespective of the dose, it is not going to cause a direct dose-related death in an individual. So it can be still considered as a non-toxic depending upon the dose at which the drug is consumed.
It is excellent presentation made by Murli and Manoj both to see how the things are different with respect to the TCBT. You might have, most of the people might have heard and read in the recent past about the Bollywood stories, the drug stories, where they call CBD containing, people are taking CBD. CBD is a remedy for THC, not the psychoactive aspect. So basically there are, but still it is bad. You know, the legal aspect of in India, I'm just going to tell because both of them are from US. What is the status of India? Just 1 minute I will tell that as per NDPS Act, the cannabis definition means only ganja, that is the flowering top of the flowers, and resin. The leaves and seeds, which are leaves are basically considered as bhang. Leaves and seeds are excluded from the definition of cannabis from the Central NDPS Act, article number 1 by 3 in the definitions. Now, just like in alcohol, the states can certainly ban it or allow it, just like in Bihar or in Gujarat, the alcohol is banned, but here it is openly available under license. Same is the same with the bhang. Bhang can also be legally sold in several states like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Rajasthan, and few more, but not anywhere else. So these are state-related things. However, bhang is less psychoactive than the ganja and than the resin terrace. So these are the status as far as the India is concerned. Now, the cultivation of hemp, which is less than 0.3 or 0.5% THC, is allowed legally by the farmers from the government of Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, and also now I think Rajasthan, thinking of that. And as far as the inhalation and ingestion, what we call, these are two different methods. Inhalation is more for recreation purpose because it floods your brain with the CBD. It immediately, instantly, within minutes, you will get the high. But that is not very good because the health-wise is also very clear that it can certainly flood the system and flood, and very short time that the neurons and the whole CB1 receptors get flooded, and you may get some effects. But as far as the ingestion is concerned, digestion it goes through the digestive system. It takes an hour or so to digest, but it is a sort of slow release. So you get a more soothing effect with the same quantity of the same cannabinoids in the system. As far as one more point is there, as a chemist, I'm basically a chemist. I understand that when in the digestive system, Manojji, what happens? That this THC gets converted into a corresponding metabolite, an acid which is much more, 3 to 4 times more effective than the THC as the psychoactive. So it takes care of the psychoactivity overall, but it is more smoother. In India, yesterday I was talking to a Badiji, and where I told about this series, he says in Ayurveda, he himself is using more than few tons of cannabis leaves every year for the formulations for Ayurveda, because this is the basis for the formulations in Ayurvedic drugs. It has 51 names in the Sanskrit scriptures. So having said that, it is extremely important to have both the historical, traditional, cultural, recreational, medicinal, as well as nutritional. No other plant on earth, perhaps, can boast to be having so useful. Now, as far as the next topic is concerned, we will be talking more on the material aspect of it, as well as some sort of traditional aspect and historical aspect, as I'm sure we'll be talking about.
Like there was some report which said that according to the margin of exposure level, nicotine and alcohol are far more harmful or intoxicating than marijuana. So so still it is not legal in many countries and many states. And number two, how do you determine that what effect will it have on one person, from one person to another?
Ma'am, every drug that enters the body or everything that we eat has to be absorbed, distributed, metabolized, and eliminated. So if you take a drug A and if I take a drug A, we may not be absorbing, distributing, metabolizing, and eliminating the drug the same way. We both are administered 10 milligram, or let me not use the word 10 milligram. Based on our body weight, if a particular drug is being administered, we may not be metabolizing the drug the same way. I may have the drug stay in my body longer as compared to you, or you may be eliminating the drug faster as compared to me. So now, when you asked about nicotine, alcohol, or any cannabis product, these drugs are definitely being metabolized. So this rate of metabolism completely alters the effect of the drug in the body. So some people will get high immediately. Some people will not have any effect. Like alcohol, I'm just telling you, we go to a lot of parties. Some people can drink 4-5 rounds of alcohol and still they can be strong, steady. But some people are not going to be like that. So it depends upon each individual. That is number one. And that is also, again, if you want to go to very basic science, there is a very big genetic aspect to the drug metabolism. The genes that are involved with drug metabolism is not the same. We all have different types of genes.
Yeah, just to add to the point, as he said, the two important things is the dose, and the second one is the person's genetic things. We call it as a new field, which is the pharmacogenomics. We identify each person's genes, how it regulates all the absorption, distribution, metabolism of the drug, and each person's vary based on their genetic component. So that's one part. Coming to the second part is the dose. Just like alcohol, you have a beer which contains around 5% of alcohol. The wine has around 10 to 13%. Whiskey, brandy, you mentioned as 40%. So we need to define what is the actual dose of the THC, whether the THC is more, whether the CBD is more, or is the combination, what is the ratio of THC versus CBD, which determines the effects. So for everything, the dose of the particular component versus the person's way of handling those compounds determine the actual responses. So we cannot really come to a defined conclusion of this person had this, the second person have the same effects or something similar to that. So hope I answered your question.
Well, with the presence of Dr. Rajiv and other experts, actually, my question has been somewhat addressed, which was related to what Dr. Govind Raju said, that one person has been reported, the death has been reported because of ingestion of marijuana, because he thought he could fly and he jumped from somewhere. And Dr. Rajiv addressed that question, and I had raised my hand before that actually, that as compared to this, something like 270,000 deaths have been reported out of alcohol abuse. And I am yet to find 3A or Alcohol Anonymous kind of organizations with respect to marijuana usage. Which doesn't mean, of course, that we are trying to promote the recreational use in any way. Dr. Rajiv has given the disclaimer. But our idea is to promote all other aspects of usage of hemp as well as marijuana, or in general the cannabis, so that it becomes sustainable. And why it can become sustainable or should become sustainable? Because of all encompassing benefits which it gives in terms of nutrition, in terms of fiber, in terms of paper, in terms of concrete, etc., etc. And in addition to all that, it gives you carbon sequestering, which is the burning issue in front of us. So, if other three experts would like to add something to this aspect, that will be great. Second is the question which comes to my mind is that endocannabinoids have been known to be involved in some very, very fundamental human biological processes like conception. Even when the jump happened from vertebrates to mammals in millions of years ago, did the presence of endocannabinoid play a role in that kind of jump? All these issues are something which need addressing. So maybe one of the speakers would like to address this part also.
See, Avitosh and all of the viewers, it has been found that the largest concentration of these endocannabinoid ligands, which are basically a key, which is a very, very smart key, it finds its lock on its own. That is the beauty. So, in the pregnant ladies, basically in the placenta. Now, the first communication between the fertilized egg, and the mother in the mammals, and the research has been done on the mice, basically, and also on elephants. See, so there are two basic components of the endocannabinoid system in reproduction, in the mammalians part of it. So they are there. If the concentration of the endocannabinoid is not there in the placenta wall, then there is no conception can happen. So zygote, the egg cannot connect to the wall of the placenta where the nourishment can start and the growth can start. So that's number one. Second thing is once the baby is just born, the child is just born, the suckling part of the baby comes from the endocannabinoid system. That means 2-AG, arachidinol glycerol has to be there in the larger concentration. Otherwise, the child cannot have the suckling part, the ability of the suckling, the milk, cannot have be developed without this endocannabinoid system. So there are some reports, I cannot say confirm that it is because of this, but this is one of the reasons that the presence of endocannabinoid system could have been one of the reasons to jump from the birds to the mammalians. This is the evolutionary aspect of this one. So cannabinoids are there, but it has nothing to do with the marijuana or cannabis.
I think two things that were touched upon is essentially the delivery systems of, THC, CBD, and everything associated with that. So whatever little, I don't know much about the pharmacokinetics of it, but I know that THC is highly lipophilic, right? So, it's pretty much, that's the reason the bioavailability might be low and potentially erratic. So, has any, are people looking into any formulation interventions where you could have either timed release directly at the site of absorption or enteric coating or any kind of formulation fixes for that? That's the first thing. The second thing is obviously inhalation will have its own set of issues, right? Because it won't be timed, it may not be controlled. But I know that for naloxone and some of the other opioid analgesics, they have looked at, sort of the inhalation route that has been highly effective with various nasal delivery devices. So have these two been explored? So this was from the formulation aspect. The second aspect that a lot of people are touched upon, I guess, is, and have there been any studies being done for like clinical studies, right? With terms of either regulatory approval or rather just informing the larger medical community about the benefits of this in terms of women or childbearing potential, because that would always be a concern regardless of whether the mechanism allows for it or not, and also in terms of abuse potential. So these were the two questions I have. Thank you.
To do any scientific work with THC globally, it's very difficult. In India, I'm not sure about how it is regulated, but for us to get THC to work in a lab, it may take 6 months to 1 year. There are so many regulations for us to get it, number one. So when you're talking about THC, basically how much scientific work has been done is going to be very minimal as compared to CBD. Okay. Number two, with regard to, yes, there have been, with regard to humans, there are a lot of, I don't know about much study carried out with pregnancy and these drugs, but there are animal models that we have studied At least I'm here in Auburn, Dr. Govindarajan and I, we have been part of a group where we have studied about fetal alcohol syndrome, fetal nicotine exposure, and now currently we are trying to do fetal THC exposure. So to answer your question, definitely it can cross the placental barrier to start with. So consumption of CBD or THC during pregnancy, number one, it can cross the placental barrier. So that question we are asking. With regard to the formulation, because it is still illegal, as Dr. Govindarajan has told, there are a lot of not much formulations the companies are trying to invest the money. Once it's illegal, why do you want to have a formulation? So whatever is there, they are just going with that.
So 2 points. For the formulation aspect, yes, companies in Europe have already looked at nasal spray and novel drug delivery systems. One of the product which I mentioned was a nasal spray, which is approved in European Union for treating neuropathic pain and spasticity disorders. So there has been formulations which have been approved in Europe. So there are studies going on in FDA. So FDA needs a lot of data to just to approve the formulation. So hope I answered the formulation question. The second question was on the effects during pregnancy. So the concept actually started with, again, this either the endogenous, sorry, not the endogenous, but the cannabis-based products is usually given for nausea and vomiting. That was the concept we generally have. And in pregnancy, in the initial few months of pregnancy, women have a lot of MSs. They have many disorders. They have a lot of vomiting issues. They have a lot of nausea issues. And in US, most of the women, because they knew that it is helpful for nausea and vomiting, they started thinking, anyways, that this widely available. So they started consuming these medications to relieve their nausea and vomiting. That's how it started. And then the studies showed that effects of these compounds crossing the placenta and having effects on the development were studied, and we were also part of those studies, and we have found some effects which is happening in terms of memory, in terms of developmental aspects regarding to the brain and things like that. So the point here is that it is not approved. That's the reason taking those substances without any knowledge is not at all advisable, considering again the dose and what is the effect in a person. That's the key aspects we always have to talk when we are looking at a clinical aspect.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And in fact, I just had a follow-up comment, more less than a question.
Okay.
Because what has happened is that as you all had correctly pointed out, I think the whole aspect of what is the combination, first of all, the approval, the correct combination to use, I think those have to be fixed, right? To do a didactic, I would say, investigation, whether it's a clinical investigation or the others, just to figure out all these other aspects. And there's also the traditional preparations that are given, right? So, a lot of these components, since they're highly lipophilic, if you give them with food, the bioavailability goes up 3 to 4 fold. So then we are talking about a total different paradigm, right? It's an apples versus oranges comparison, because the whole absorption, metabolism, and even does it cross the blood-brain barrier, all those questions may come up as investigational objectives, right? So I just feel that the larger community would probably need to narrow down on a preferred mode of intake, right? Be it in a traditional form or in an isolated chemical form, and then proceed with doing trials for the same, because we have probably been stuck in this quagmire for a while, because if 7-8 years back there were a lot of California companies that sprouted out, thinking that this is going to be the next post-pharma revolution, but it's all ended in a damn squib, largely because of, I would say, regulatory malaise. But I think there is still an opportunity to investigate that, but again, maybe looking at the more traditional modes of administration that have been taken for a while, that a gentleman also referred to in terms of Ayurvedic preparations, might be something worth investigating. It's a question, query, comment, but I just thought I'd bring that up. Thank you.
The formulation is totally a different industry, and that requires a lot of attention. The compound is active. We know that it is active, but how do we deliver it, in what means we deliver, is a subject of concern the pharmaceutical industries is trying to work on. Hopefully we'll have a answer for that in the near future. It's all about the combination, the THC versus the CBD, what ratio it goes into, and what is the disease we are looking at. That's the most important questions we try to target, is what is the disease we are looking at, and whether these ratios, what is the exact ratios which has to be determined in order to be specifically beneficial in terms of the efficacy and as well as the safety. These are the main things which we look at. So hopefully we'll have an answer in the near future.
The CBD, especially the marijuana, when people smoke the marijuana, they're smoking the dry weed, not the processed form, and it is ignited. So does it change the components, the composition of the chemical involved, active chemicals, as opposed to when we give it orally or through inhalation as liquids or something? And because I know the asthma medications and also inhalation has been found to be quicker, more instant relief. Is that when we do it through any other process like the disc or whatever in nasal things, would the chemical be any different than when it is ignited to smoke? And my second question was with the oral products of cannabis. Since it is lipophilic, would it not go and deposit itself in the adipose tissue, and that's why less is available? And if the person happens to lose weight, he'll be flooded with it and wouldn't know what's happening, like it happens with most of the medicines as you know it.
As I told you, number one, with regard to the adipose tissue, it's a long shot. You're talking theoretically. Okay. Practically, it's a chemical. It is rapidly metabolized and erratically. That's what Dr. Manoj was telling that. So it's not going to get to that level. But again, I will not say no, because again, we are going to go with the dose and the route of administration. Say, I can do anything, if I can administer intravenously or something, I can administer a dose very higher where I can make sure that so is it possible? Yes, it's possible. But on a dose that the humans are consuming, I don't think it is going to go that far. First, I want to understand, make sure it is rapidly metabolized. The amount being considered. So if you're thinking like what we eat every day, we are metabolizing the food. If you take a tablet, it is being metabolized. Same way, when cannabis has been exposed, I'm going to use the word exposed because there are a lot of route of administration, route of exposure is so much different. Yes, we are exposed. Based on that dose and the route of exposure, human body, that's what I told you. What are the two molecules when you think have been existing for thousands of centuries is wine and cannabis. None other than. You go to Ayurveda, you go to any literature, if you go and look at it, it is wine which people have consumed and cannabis. So which means our body system, the enzymes, the receptors, the organ system has adapted to these cannabinoids. And again, you have to understand this. Why did I start with that? If you talk to Manoj, endogenous cannabinoids, the effects are there only for few minutes to few hours. That's it. Now we are talking about phytocannabinoids. Why did I tell that the synthetic cannabinoids are the danger? Phytocannabinoids are a natural product. Whatever you say, if you believe in God, it's a natural product created. If you believe in science, a natural product, when you consume, the body has the tools. The body has the mechanisms to consume. So we are going to eliminate it. But now, when it comes to the synthetic drugs, now that's the biggest problem we are going to have. It's not about the natural product, not about that. To answer your question, yes, I don't think it is not going to go that far when it's consumed at a normal exposure. That's the reason I told you. It has been there for centuries, which means if it would have been toxic, we would have banned this botanical. If it would have been poisonous, if it would have killed people, we would have not been taking it. So definitely, I don't think we should worry so much aspect of the physiological aspect. But the problem here, as Dr. Govindaraj Manoj sir told, the major problem here is what people do after consuming it. It is not the effect of the natural product. That's what I want to make sure that I always want to make sure that cannabis is a natural product. It is not toxic. What we do after doing that, that's a man-made effect. It's not going to be anything, it was induced by something. So that is what I want to make sure that.
So I'll just talk about the first question you mentioned about the smoking part and how the THC gets modified. It does definitely get modified, whether it's inhalation versus an ingestion mode. But the generation of these chemicals is yet to be evaluated. So we are not sure how much of THC is actively there. What does the THC get converted if it is smoked versus whether it's ingested? All those things are still under studies. So we are not in a clear, concise way of determining whether it is there or not. But definitely, as I mentioned in one of the slides, smoking can have different metabolites from THC or the CBD in comparison to the ingested molecules. So there is a different yes for your answer.
Actually, this question about THC and marijuana research being bottlenecked or stymied by illegality of it is a very complex issue, in the sense that like Dr. Murali Krishna told, that religious doesn't ban it and science doesn't ban it, or kind of points to it being harmful or seriously dangerous per se. And because of that, as well as its potential to address something like 60-70 different medical issues or diseases, it has a huge money making potential, and beyond that also it is having a huge money making potential. But while it is natural form and its method of consumption, with respect to inhalation versus oral ingestion, and oral ingestion also in different forms and different parts, that gives us a very complex way of addressing the dose. And because eventually what reaches in your body and then starts acting is what is the active part or answerable part, and then the combination, as experts have pointed out. But I am pointing not to the chemistry of it, but more to the policy and the economics and the money making parts of it, of which I have more expertise, to be frank. And I believe that is what is harming the potential good benefits which can reach to millions of people, because after all it's a phytocannabinoid and it will be very easily and cheaply available. It is abundant, and I suspect, because at this moment I am speaking not as a speaker but as a audience, so I can go out on a limb a little bit, that this is what is the lobbies are acting from research going in a more strong way. And although after 90s there has been exponential increase in the work being done in the various forms of cannabinoid chemicals, as well as other parts, including some very advanced electronic and other aspects of it also, which are actually giving it a lease of life. But this is what is creating bottleneck in research of cannabis, and there lies the crux of the problem. That a researcher of a level of Dr. Murali Krishna and Dr. Govind Rajalu will have to go and knock doors for 6 months in USA. Imagine what will happen in India. Probably you will grow old and you will still not get permissions to do the research. And that's why perspective of Dr. Reddy, who will come down the line, will be priceless for us to know what is going on in India. And this is the beauty in case of India, where it was used along with China for centuries together, and we have not done any research after the last major research which was done by was British hemp study in 1892 or thereabout. So that is where the crux of the problem is. There are no problem in the chemical or other talents. There is no problem in other industrial or that kind of research and talent. Problems are right in the policy and the mindset, and that is where the changes should start happening.
Sir, I have a related question in the chat box, as his comment. He asks, are there plans for the distinguished researchers to carry out activism for marijuana in India? India is going through a brain drain. As it is, we could do well with the backing of the scientific community.
Ma'am, it's a governmental design, ma'am. See, when you think about research, number one, it's not about the brain drain. We need funding, ma'am. Everybody, we all have our ideas. We all have our ideas, and we want to implicate the ideas. That's not a problem. There's no brain drain in India. Just don't tell them. We have a lot of smart people. That is not the right thing. Where are we going to get a funding? Is it going to be from a private sector or is it a public sector? Public sector, when we say that, it's going to be more on the welfare of the society. If it's a private sector, they are going to fund based on what funding can come back. So I'm going to go back to Dr. Agarwalji or Dr. Rajiv say that the economic impact. See, that is where people are going to be now. I don't know whether people are going to be greedy or people are really going to think about the welfare of the society. Or the third thing, this product is an Indian product. If you want to look from a basic product, people have been using in India for thousands and thousands of years. So now, how are we going to protect this? Is it indigenous to us? So the commercial aspect, or is it the scientific aspect? Who's going to fund? We have all the tools, we have all the technology, we have every aspect of that in India. So what is missing is the funding. How are you going to, without funding, research cannot be done. And let's be very honest with that. You can have thousands of ideas to make sure that we are implementing something, the goals, the objectives, it is money driven. We need economic support. It has to be manpower, it has to be the techniques, it has to be the tools. All these are required. And we need funding. Whatever you want to validate, what the final product, it may take years, but still, see, one thing that you cannot deny about it, it has plenty of therapeutic value. It has prophylactic value. As I told that, like a lot of thousands of people are taking multivitamins. Whether we are going to agree or not agree in another 10 to 20 years, everybody may be consuming a cannabis kind of form of cannabis. It can be a gel, it can be a tablet, it can be a chewing gum. We are all going to do that. That is where the current society is. We cannot deny that, we cannot stop it. You think about the cosmetic industry, you think about the nutrition, we are there. Who is going to accept it? How are we going to validate it? That's the only thing.
But here is an update. I can mention in many minutes or so. In 2018 November, Government of India allowed the research on cannabis for medicinal and research purposes and for industrial purposes, and the Indian Institute of Integrated Medicine, Jammu and Kashmir, has been identified and it has been funded by a Canadian company and a company called Boheco in Mumbai, Bombay Hemp Company. They have been a participant in the research, and I wanted that his director or the team can join us for a discussion, but I think they are busy. He is the director of the two labs. So in May, he personally told me that there is no possibility in the May, perhaps sometime later on. And if that happens, we will just bring him sometime and have a discussion with him on the research done in India and being done, and what are the government plans for that, funding research, as well as what are the basic policy related things will be covered in the next talk, as I mentioned earlier. So India is also waking up. Let me put that way, but very late. I will show you in the next one what is the second issue globally on this aspect, medicinal as well as industrial aspects. So that will tell the activity of research in India as well as elsewhere.
Essentially, wonderful information is coming, but unfortunately, at this moment, we can't formulate a very actionable recommendation, and hopefully we can reach some of that. But very simply, if let's say alcohol can be the stepping stone towards harder drugs and eventual problems in society of crime and other things, as well as self-harm, which happens with people who eventually move on to hard drugs, or as well as the damage to the body which is done by excessive alcohol. It is number is something like 1 death versus 2,70,000 deaths. But look at the availability of alcohol anywhere in the world, including the city where we live in. How our honorable chief minister is promoting, because it is a revenue making, money making aspect. Same thing is true for many other drugs also. So that's why I say that essentially it is the lobbies and the policies which are being shaped by those kind of geopolitical, economical, corporate forces. And that is why, like Dr. Murali Krishna said very clearly, there is no dearth of talent, and there is no, particularly India and in general world also. Once it gets focused and the lanes of work are cleared, the results will happen. They have been happening, in fact, last 20 odd years, since the marijuana got the new lease of life by discovery of endocannabinoids and so on and so forth. So that is where eventually this will come to, because the potential, therapeutic potential is huge. And in US, the laws are such that you cannot give them in organic form, so you will have to go to inorganic form, and till such formulations happen, there are legal barriers. In India, traditionally, they have been giving in organic form the way Ayurveda medicines are given, and benefits have been there. But we have stopped the research. So, such various bottlenecks are there, and their legacy lies in various policies and genesis issues. So, that was a quick comment which I wanted to make.
Yes, sir. This was just a follow up, and especially to the comment that was just made. Like someone who has kind of worked in this approach, but not on the cannabinoid system. Like about 20 years back, people were working on St. John's wort or some other traditionally administered nutraceuticals, herbals, isolating the active components and giving that, and the outcome has always been the same, right? Regulatory quagmire, inability to the sort of regulate the synthetic form in terms of therapeutic effectiveness versus the side effects and which combination to give. So I do second the thought that if inorganic is the correct word to use, but the more traditional forms need to be studied. And India has this regulatory malaise and this socio-political quagmire, right? That's very difficult to break, and especially given the fact that where India is headed, it seems to, I think within not only 10, 20 years, even 10 years, if you look at some of the epidemiological studies, we are looking at sort of an opioid crisis, maybe even worse in a multidimensional way, considering the things that are being abused by the younger generation right now. And I think it's going to be really severe, both with physical and mental health issues. So there definitely is a very, very pressing need, in my opinion, to sort of investigate this further. And I feel that the ground zero for that should be looking at the traditional preparations in India, because again, as a pharmacologist, if I look at it, a lot of these traditional preparations that were studied before, they have some inherent intrinsic formulation characteristics, right? That enhance the bioavailability, that probably prevent the metabolism if the metabolites are either inactive or more psychoactive. It just was naturally designed in a way that makes you wonder, right? So, and what happens when we isolate the active ingredient? You take out, whatever makes the microenvironment conducive to an effective therapeutic regimen. So I just feel that the Indian government or the Indian setup, or us who live overseas and are researchers, should probably form sort of a consortium and look at these Ayurvedic preparations, be it cannabinoids and others, and sort of do a more didactic, like a clinical trial format or evidence-based medicine, and kind of narrow that down first, right? Because I think that would be the best way to move forward, and then sort of reverse engineer the process rather than what we are going now. So this was something that had come up before, I guess, before the whole CBD paradigm came up in the last decade and a half with the other traditional medicines. But again, is there any, I would say, why is the Indian government so slow in terms of treating Ayurvedic medicine or preparations or any of our traditional ways, right? And not allowing it to go mainstream or even doing further studies, because you have never heard of any Ayurvedic clinical trial. So I just thought I'd put it out there based on the comments that, and some of the aspects of the talk.
So two aspects, sir. One, any threat to a drug company, it's an economical war. You know what I'm saying? Number one, whether we have to be fair. A drug company spends years to develop a drug, and they spend millions of dollars to develop a drug. So anything that's going to challenge, then how is the other party going to stop the growth of the other one? That's going to be always going to be there. That economical war, we are going to say that. Yes, we can always claim that for centuries, Ayurvedic therapy is far more prophylactic, far more therapeutic. It can prevent, it can treat. We always can go, the adverse effects are less. But still, as I told you, somebody has to come out and come to fund us and then take us to the next stage. So that funding, and that is the most important thing. So whatever you say, we can always say, we can validate it scientifically, we can prove it, but unless somebody comes and invests. But one thing that we are going to deny, not going to deny, is in Europe, they have coffee shop. They call this as a coffee shop. In every coffee shop, particularly in Holland, if you go, they have cannabis. And people who are above the age of, I think for alcohol it was 14, I think for cannabis that is 17 or 18, they have started it. So in our earlier conversation, we talked about that, government doesn't have anything to do with alcohol. Everywhere in India, now alcohol has become, if you think about 60s, 70s, and now, alcohol is an accepted form of socialization in India. Whether we deny it or not, if I was a 70 kid, so when alcohol was it's kind of a very bad thing. People who drink alcohol were not accepted in the society. But now, alcohol is part of the social function. Everywhere you go, you have alcohol. And whether we like it or not, in another 20 years, we are going to have coffee shops with cannabis products, which we are not going to deny that. That's coming, or it has come. So now, when we talk about this pharmacology, toxicology, as a scientist, I'm very excited to talk about it. But in reality, how are we going to overcome the adverse effects? That's the only thing that I'm going to use, is the adverse effects associated with these consumption of these drugs. The major problem here is adulteration. Once you have a demand for these kind of products, the adulteration kicks in. With every natural product, that's the major problem. And we cannot regulate it. These are not regulated products. So when you think about all these things, we cannot regulate any of these substances. So we are not going to have any much regulatory agency, but we are going to have it in the market, legally or illegally. Most probably it's going to be legalized. The same way what happened to alcohol. If you think about the story in alcohol, all these cannabis is going to be legalized soon. The only problem is, from the health science point of view, how are we thinking about the acute and chronic effect? Acute effect, chronic effect. It can be both mental, physical, economical impact. We have to get ready for that. So I'm just bringing a very similar alcoholism issue. You think about, if you have been from 70s to 2020 in India, the last 50 years, now alcohol is part of your socialization. Without alcohol, there is no function in India. Think about it. The same way, in another 20, 25 years, we may have cannabis like that.
I just wanted to add to what Dr. Murali Krishna was saying, and it was in relation to what Mohit was asking. Essentially, why there is not much research with respect to the Ayurvedic kind of or natural formulations and the ways of administration. So the genesis lies in the US lobbies of pharma, petrochemical, as well as alcohol lobby, which ensured eventually that there was a ban first in US, and then post-war, when US became the prominent superpower in the world, they made rest of the world sign an anti-narcotic drug convention, which happened sometime in mid or late 60s. And Indians were also called to come and sign this. Indians, even at that time, we were dependent US wheat, etc. We were begging ball. So we still resisted, and we said, look, in our country it was part of tradition and culture and worship and so on and so forth. So they were told that, okay, you guys are bad boys, but we give you another 25 odd years. So slowly you educate your people and come out of it. So eventually, during the time of Prime Ministership of Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, this convention was signed by India. And under all this, no research has happened, or very, very little, minimal, scattered research has happened. All said and done, research will have to be done as per the prescription of scientists, the way it is carried out, like Dr. Manoj or Dr. Murali Krishna is saying. Research will have to be done as per evidence and fact only, whether it is with on Ayurvedic formulation or pure pharmacological preparation. So that is the problem.
Yeah, just a very quick follow-up, sir. So I just wanted to ask, because again, I'm a clinical pharmacologist who works in pharma industry. I worked a lot, and in fact, still working with a lot of opioid analgesic approvals. So there are a lot of individuals like me who are interested in taking forward and even shuttling between the US and India to do this. So if there's a venue or something that we can sort of, pitch in, help out, And also quickly, I just wanted to ask if the Ayush Ministry, because whatever little investigation I did, because this is sort of like a side interest for me, but there is a lot of, I think, voices that are going to take this further in terms of looking at more evidence-based medicine with Ayurvedic products, more specifically in the CBD arena. So has anybody heard anything, or is that something that you would think is worth pursuing?
I can say that there is an institute in Gujarat, Jamnagar, I think. Oh no, not for Jamnagar. I will just get it. It was very recently inaugurated by PM for traditional medicine institute. There we have a paper in the next book which we are going to get. They are already doing on the formulations of the Ayurvedic. I have also been personally involved for many years in this Ayurvedic formulations and scientific validation of that. The problem in the cannabinoids or the cannabis is basically the content of the THC varies from parts of the plants, means leaves to the flowers, to the raisins differently, and they are very vaguely categorized in the NDPS, not except for the leaves. But the problem is that even with the leaves, if it is kept for certain periods, it will go down into the THC and the CBD and get metabolized automatically, auto-metabolized, or rather degrade. I will say degrade, not metabolize. So these things are happening. There is no. That is where the concentration, just like in any formulations, you have an alcohol concentration. There must be a methodology developed for the THC concentration or CBD concentration in any formulations. Many things like toffees, like or the coffee shops. Most of the time in the next decade, perhaps, or in this decade, we will see even in India. The formulations are developing. Many people are developing this formulation, particularly CBD. You can purchase CBD from the Indian companies under simple doctor's recommendation. So things will move, and as Mohitji very clearly mentioned, there is a problem with the Ayurvedic formulations, but there are many new approaches, and there are patented drugs or other patented formulations. Ayurvedic formulations are also approved that way or under the process of approval. One of them I can simply say is for migraine. And Ayurvedic bhasmas are also under the same things, by the way. So this is a larger perspective I'm talking about, but as the cannabinoids are concerned, our policy matters, the legal aspects are really the biggest stumbling block.
I just wanted to share a quick information with Mohit. Essentially, Ministry of Ayush is now giving grants to those who are having institutional affiliations, and if you will go to their website, you will get information about how to work on these grants as well as how to obtain it. I have not been able to work on it because at this moment I don't have any institutional affiliation, but you probably are. And anybody who is listening to the discussion and is interested in working or finding some, I don't think it's a very big grant. It is about 25 lakhs to 50 lakhs, etc., etc. And there are conditions which you will have to go and check for yourself. But these are available, and that's what I wanted to quickly share. So Dr. Rajiv, what he is saying still stands, sir.
I want to thank Aparnaji for inviting me, Dr. Rajiv sir, and Sangam Talks.